All right, so I had to take a break so I can come out here and do this. I've had some ideas I wanted to share for a long time, and I didn't really know how to start. And I think I finally figured it out. Not only did I not know how to start, but there were some things that were still some details I had still to work out. Things that I was left, puzzled by. There's still lots of questions that I have um, about the books, but I think I have all the important pieces worked out. To start off with, this video is going to be the first of three videos for sure that I'm going to do that would lay the foundation for anything that came after it. I'm going to have this video here will be addressing the theme of the books, like the overarching, the moral of the story. What is there to learn from the books? What is Kvothe learning himself through his adventures, right? That's the first video. That's this video. The next video is going to take a very high level look at the timeline, all the way from the very beginning, from before the creation war, how the story progressed to get to where we are now, and what I expect to happen after that. Those two things will be done in a very like a high level kind of overview of the story. I will mention things. I will cite parts of the story, but not necessarily give chapter and verse for everything that I say. The third video will be more in depth. That one is going to be taking a look at all the different stories within the story that we hear and how they relate to each other. How do they connect? How to why does the story of Dayanica have anything to do with Kvothe and why where he's at now? The stories that Scarpy tells, and the story we get from Trappist. It's gonna be looking at how all these things relate to the main story, right? Now, I will be making some assumptions, like things I stopped thinking about, things I don't feel like I need to explain anymore because I stopped questioning them. So if I lose you, if I say anything that doesn't sound right, or you want, like you're asking for, you want a source for something, or you want some more explanation, don't hesitate to leave a comment, and I will do my best to answer all those as I can. And again, like I said, this is going to be like the foundation for what comes after. So it's just going to be a lot of speculation that may not be as thoroughly supported with the with all my reasoning as you might want at first. And if that's the case, just let me know and I'll expand on the idea. So to begin, I want to look at what Kvothe is learning. Like, what's the moral of the story for him and for us? Kvothe goes to lots of places during his adventures, and he learns lots of different magic, lots of different skills, but all of his significant teachers have all been teaching him a very similar lesson. Like, the same theme comes up over and over again from good people, from smart people, from people he should be really listening to, but he has a habit of ignoring what he doesn't know that he needs, right? The first time this shows up is when he's with Abinthy and he binds the air in his lungs to the air outside. He almost kills himself, and Abinthy is really distraught about this. He realizes now, okay, maybe this is not a good idea. Maybe he's teaching this child something that he can use to harm himself or others. And he starts teaching Kvothe about being thoughtless. And he uses that example, like, what happens if you give a child a sword? Kvothe's response is so consistent through learning these lessons. When Abinthy says this to him, his response is, yeah, I get it. If you have power and you're stupid, then something, then bad things can happen. And he's so impatient. He's so impatient that he's like, yeah, I got it. He doesn't listen. He doesn't put thought into the lesson about how bad thoughtlessness can be. Now, interesting in that little exchange is the fact that when he's teaching him about being thoughtless, he says, tell me what you know about Lanray. Tell me what you know about your father's song. And they have a little bit of an exchange about it, but he stops and he's like, you know what, it's he needs to be alone right now. But the interesting thing about that is that the story of Lanray has that lesson to teach. This is a problem that story could help him teach, right? So I think that that's important. That'll be, that'll come up later in the future videos. And people try to teach him the same or similar lesson over and over again. He goes to school. He tries to learn from Elodin, and Elodin's doing his weird thing that Quoth doesn't understand. They ultimately have that exchange where Elodin says, he's trying to seduce him into understanding, and you're quit grabbing at my tits, right? He's telling him to be patient, to trust him. He's teaching him what he needs to learn, but he's being obstinate. He's not learning the way he needs to learn. He thinks, Quoth has this idea. He thinks he knows what he wants to learn. He thinks he knows what teaching should look like. And because the teaching doesn't look like what he expects, he doesn't appreciate it. He doesn't understand. He's completely blind to anything that he didn't decide that he wanted in advance, right? It's a process. You have to slow down. You have to, do it the right way. Master Lauren, perfect example. Master Lauren. He shows up at the he drugs himself to get through his whipping, and after it's over, even though he just stuffed himself full of drugs and addled his wits to some extent, he is so impatient to get into the archives that he goes without considering what what that might mean, right? And so he shows up, and Ambrose tricks him, and he shows up there with a candle, and Master Lauren freaks out. Now, which is a completely reasonable response, and Master Lauren reacts exactly appropriately. He's like, you get out of here, you're banned. He's going to teach him this lesson. He's going to teach him to be patient. He's going to teach him to be responsible. To I forget what the words where he will use when Quoth came back to him and says, "What do I need to do to get back into the archives?" He says, "You got to show that you have the patience, that you have the good judgment that you've been lacking so far." And that's a perfect lesson for him. Oh, again, somebody like it was. Master Lauren, even though you could say, okay, it was Ambrose who tricked him, he still put himself in the situation to be tricked. He behaved irresponsibly, and is ultimately responsible for his actions, regardless of anybody else. And that's an excellent lesson all by itself, right? Similar again is Master Kilvin. Master Kilvin also, he builds his deck lamp that he makes with the graded switch, and it's got it's a bullseye lantern, it's a thieves lamp, and Master Kilvin is like, we can't sell this. This is a bad thing. He comes back later. He builds the bloodless, and he's got the crossbow there. And Master Kilvin is like, "Where'd you get this crossbow? That you're not supposed to have this." He took materials from stocks to sell, to use in a way that they weren't meant for, and built this thing that was, in the end, it was good. So he says, okay, here's the first, you built a bad thing in a good way, and that's no good. And then you built a good thing, but you did it in a bad way, and that's better, but not right. Still not right. The best thing is to do to do a good thing in a good way. That's not the same exact lesson as don't be impatient, but also one so central to the story. So something so fundamental that he's being taught these things that he's ignoring, that are causing him, like causing disasters down the road, right? So, and in relation to that, it reminds me of one of my favorite quotes was from Penn Jillette, who I was listening to one of his podcasts, and he said, people want to say that the ends justify the means. But in truth, in reality, the ends do not justify the means. Because in reality, there are no ends. There are only means. And it's such a great way of saying it. Like, Quoth continuously is doing things that he does them in the wrong way. He does them in a sneaky way because in the end, he's convinced that he's doing what he's doing for the greater good. Okay? That's a significant phrase. Like, that's... that is a mere type thing that he's doing. He's convinced that that's what he's out for, is the greater good. But the ends do not justify the means, and Master Kilvin is trying to teach him that. When he goes to Shayam, when he's learning to fight from the Adem, Shayam tells him, she's just like, you're learning so fast. In a year you'll be as good as Tempe. And he says, you flatter me. She's like, I don't. I tell you your weakness. She again is telling him to slow down. I mean, I imagine that lesson comes from the fact that for the Adem, learning to fight and learning the Lethani are so tightly, like, that is, the school is not just fighting, it is both. And so Kvothe is very quick to pick up the one, but he's ignoring the thing that he doesn't understand that he needs. And that's why that's his weakness. Because he can learn to fight, but not learn when to fight. Then what are you doing? And they even expressed their concern about that. Like, he's got this darkness inside of him, and he's got, like, they're worried about what this will mean, that they let him learn to fight, right? There's also the lesson that things are not always as they seem. Kvothe is so frequently mistaken about things. Like, this is one of those places where like, these tiny little misconceptions that don't seem to be a big deal, but taken in the context, like, taken to like extrapolated into his life in general, that he's making these assumptions about what's going on that he has no way of knowing for sure. He never stops to question them, and that ends up ultimately leading to the disaster, that he's responsible for. All this guilt that he's carrying now, that he's telling the story. And that, one good example of that is, after the incident with the candle, he thinks Master Loren doesn't like him. He's like, I'm sure I've made a terrible impression of Master Loren. He's never going to support me, blah, blah, blah. Master Loren, I bet you money Master Loren would have been right behind him. Like, he would have been a great person to talk to. He would not necessarily have let him back into the archives, but he was never, that his anger was in the moment. And as soon as it was over, he was very calm and collected, and he did the right thing. Even in his anger, he did the right thing. He gave him the right punishment. He was teaching the right lesson. And he never displayed any animosity toward him after that. He was going to let him back in the archives. He said, what do I got to do to get back in? He's like, show me that you have the patience, that you're going to be, that you're going to have the good judgment that you've been lacking so far. There was no, it wasn't hatred for him personally. It wasn't a complete lack of respect. It was him teaching a lesson. He does not give Master Loren enough credit in that regard. Like, he goes to Master Loden. He wants Master Loden to teach him naming. He thinks he knows what it should look like to learn naming. Like, he's got this misconception about what Master Loden teaching him would be. And so, he has that conversation. He's like, why won't you teach me? And Master Loden says, what makes you think I'm not teaching you? He thinks he's nuts. He doesn't trust him. That's another thing. Like, he doesn't ever trust any of the people that have shown themselves to be trustworthy. He does not trust them. He does not tell them. He gets himself into trouble by sneaking around, doing things the wrong way. He thinks he knows what's up. He's so arrogant in his in his belief that he's right and that he's doing the right thing, that it's leading him into trouble. That's why in the inn, when Chronicler and Bast meet and they have their confrontation, and Kvothe stops them, and he says, if there's one thing I will not abide, it is the folly of a willful pride. Now, the fact that he rhymes as he's saying this, I think is an indicator of the added weight of these words. These are important words, right? And the fact that he uses the word folly, the name of his sword, like, this is not a mistake. Like, this is an important choice of words here, right? And the fact that this is the name of his sword, the origin of which I have theories on, this indicates to me the fact that the folly of a willful pride, that was his mistake. That's why he won't abide it. He's done that so many times. He can't stand that anymore. He's got to now, especially now that he's having to relive this story again, right? So when in the chapter where the chapter is called "The Price of Remembering," it's like, what is worth the price of remembering? Like, nothing but the truth could break me, because he has to now, to relive this story, to tell the true story of him as he made mistake after mistake after mistake, after he had people trying to steer him the right way, and he just wouldn't listen. He wouldn't learn. He wouldn't do things the right way, because of his willful pride. because he thought he knew. He thought he knew better than everyone else. And like, that is probably the most significant, it's a tremendously significant interaction. Like, that speaks so many volumes, so much about where he's at. You know, because he's already said, like, he's the one responsible for everything that's going on, this war that they're facing, the, like, so much of the calamity that befell the world. He is responsible, and this is why he's responsible for it. And he's reliving the, you know, he has to watch himself, you know, through telling the story. He has to do, again, observe all of his mistakes as he headed off. Like, now there's nothing you can do about it. It's gonna turn out bad. That's the tragedy of the story. You know, he's gotta, like, that he was full of good intentions, but he didn't listen, and he was arrogant. He thought he knew what was what. So when it comes to the lesson about things aren't always what they appear, something I want to point out is in what Scarpy said. Like, he was talking to him and he said, "I only know one story, but I know that there are pieces of the story that seem to be stories in of themselves," right? That all stories are true. All stories are true, but, you know, to be a good storyteller, you have to be a bit of a liar. You have to, like, to be able to not take it at face value. You don't have to swallow it whole. You be, you know, a good student. Vachette says that if you're, you know, something about a good student, something good, some good word, a good student will break open the nut and find the meat inside, and see that value in this story, not necessarily as a literal interpretation of you know, whatever it was. So I think that's, you know, he is in the present day, in the Waystone Inn, Quoth, understanding the significance of these stories that he's heard. You know, we have the story that Trappist tells, we have the stories that Scarpy tells him, we have different songs, the Lay of Sir Savian, we have plays like Daonica that are mentioned as part of the story, and I think that these are mentioned because they are specifically the ones that were significant to the story. These were ones that were true in some significant sense, right? The story of Jax, that's another good one. Very important story that we'll get. I can't wait to get into that one, because that one I'm gonna blow your mind with that one. So that's another thing. Like, all these stories that he's hearing, like, it sort of seems at face value that they're just, you know, folk tales, or there's tales of, you know, the tales of Tamerlane, valuable for, you know, for entertainment, but he's giving them to us now as part of this larger story because they were important to his story. You know, these were true stories. Something there's something to be learned from them. And so that, and then, and most important of all, when it comes to that, things aren't always what they seem, is his conversation with the Cathay. That one, when the lights went on with that one, I, like, my brain melted for a while. I had to, like, you know, it took a while to kind of consume that. So he, in assuming that he understands the significance of things, gets himself into a hot water. You know, he thinks he understands what the Cathay was telling him, and he, you know, whatever decisions he made as a result of that, it was all related to this same theme of, you know, him learning, him maturing, and how that came about is very, very interesting. We'll get into that next video. I can't wait to do the next part, because that timeline, that you know, here's the history of how this came about, is very, very cool. You know, let me know what you think about that.